Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ida Ortiz. I'm from the Community Technical Assistance Center, CTAC. Welcome to today's webinar, Self-Care in the Present Moment, Mindfulness for the Helping Professional.
Hi, everyone. This is Caradina Sale. We wanted to go over a few things with you before we begin. We have a chat box to the right of you. We're going to ask you to chat in all of your questions or concerns, and we're going to be gathering those for Reka to do a question and answer at the end of today's presentation. She'll leave about 10 minutes to do so. So thank you so much for being here with us.
We are grateful to have Reka Prasada presenting today. I recently had the honor to participate in one of Reka's mindfulness workshops, and it was very helpful. So we began thinking that it may also be beneficial for you as a provider as well. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Reka, for presenting today.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm very pleased to be with you all today and gratified that so many of you are interested in mindfulness. It's a critical time in mental health, and it's a good practice to start learning about. So thank you for being here today. So let's start with me. I am Reka Prasad. I am a therapist and a social worker, as well as a mindfulness instructor. I also work at NYU running the mindfulness programming there, so there's quite a bit of experience. I've been a long practicing Buddhist, and I went to NYU for my master's degree. I'm also a family therapist, so all of these tools that I'm going to be sharing with you today are things that I've used with clients in a variety of settings, so I hope it's useful to you. So we have a lot to cover, so let's just dig in. So let's talk about first the agenda of what we're going to do. We're going to do, we did our introduction. I'm going to talk a little bit about mindfulness, about meditation, the research outcomes, the relational benefits and benefits to your clients, as well as the Therapeutic Alliance. We're going to do a brief, but I hope very useful body scan so that you can experience a little bit of what mindfulness meditation can be and is. I do these in most of my workshops. And then we'll end with some questions. Hopefully we'll have some time. So let's begin with what is mindfulness. So mindfulness is the intentional moment-to-moment awareness of our thoughts, emotions, sensations, and surrounding environment without judgment, and what I think is particularly important, compassion. Often when we're doing these things, we're very judgmental, so kindness and compassion is a big part of this practice. So we use a bodily anchor, our breath primarily, but we can also use sound, we can use visuals, words, a mantra, or a statement that we continue to repeat over and over. And we do this so that we can be in the present moment and drop down from the head so that we can awaken, so to speak, to the life that is unfolding right now in the here and now. Often what we do is we vacillate between the past and the future, which brings up anxiety about the future and often depression about the past. And we're not in the present moment, what's happening right now. So we're often vacillating between the two. This allows us to come into the present moment. It is a secular practice. While it does have Buddhist roots, Buddhism itself was a secular practice in its origins, so this can be combined with any faith-based religion, spirituality, or non-theistic beliefs. So all of this is very easy in theory. We're using the breath to drop down repeatedly to come into the present moment, but it's quite difficult to do in practice, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So the next question is, how and when can we move into the present moment? I offered a little cartoon because it's not something that we often want to be in. We're often avoiding what's happening in the present moment. The cartoon says she wants to be anywhere but in the present moment, preferably a beach. I often feel that way myself. But any moment offers the opportunity to be mindful. That can be just by using our breath, by taking a moment and doing some deep breathing, whether that's in our office, at home, walking down the street. We can do it via many forms of meditation, whether that's silent meditation, chanting, walking, standing. There are lots of different forms that you can dip into and see what works for you. We can do it while we're doing our chores, One of the examples I like to give is while we're washing our dishes. We can be aware of our senses as we're feeling the water over our hands, turning our hands to the faucet, feeling the faucet in our hands. It's a way of using the senses to really be in the moment. And it is amazing how much our mind wanders when we're doing all of these things and we're not present for the task at hand. When we come into those various things, we realize in that moment what we're missing. And so these things can also help when we're walking, when we're driving, when we're using public transportation. As a native New Yorker, it often takes a lot to be on the subway, a lot of deep breathing. But it's also a way of depersonalizing things around you. I often joke when we walk down the street in New York City, somebody will inevitably bump us in the shoulder. And then we get really worked up, we take it personally, we're carrying it with us for 30 blocks, still wondering, why that person did that to us. And they're in Brooklyn, out of sight, out of mind. It is just not personal. They weren't thinking about you. Present moment awareness allows us to dip into what we're feeling right now and really decide, is this what's happening? What is the reality here? We're the only species that doesn't sort of shake things off. You don't see a gazelle in the jungle who gets chased by a lion but somehow escapes and goes back to her crew and says, did you see what that lion did, and still talks about it 3 days later. They shake it off and they move on. Present moment awareness allows us to dip into what's happening for us and decide what and how we want to continue and be present in this moment. And often it allows us to create that separation. We can use it with loved ones. I'll talk a little bit about the relational dynamics and mindful communication. It's incredibly important to use this while we're communicating with others. Being in the present moment allows us to be with what is actually here in the moment in front of us, rather than past experiences, past fights, all the conditioning that comes along. But I'll talk about that a little later. When we're engaging with devices, I like to talk about devices because they can be our friend in this practice, but they're often our foe in life. We're often completely tuned out. I don't know if any of you have gone to the point where you start getting angry or anxious and then you pick up your phone, or you're on 3 devices at once, not giving your full attention to any one of them. So we'll talk a little bit about focus later on. It also helps when we're feeling emotionally triggered. So this is something that's very relevant to our work. When we're feeling triggered, it's a way in a very CBT kind of modality, and there is mindfulness-based cognitive therapy because they do work very well together. It's a way of coming into awareness, present moment awareness. What is happening for me right now? And again, creating some space so that we can be fully aware of what's happening and not just react to whatever's arising in us from past experiences. So that's how and when, and it is free. You can do this anywhere, and we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that a little later on. So myths about meditation. I know a lot of people have different feelings about it and are hesitant to try it for a number of reasons. One, that they feel like, I can't sit still, I can't be in one place at once, I'm a bad meditator, I've tried it, it doesn't work. I want to just dispel that right away. There is no such thing as a bad meditator. Meditation is really about being with whatever arises. So if that is anxiety, if that is restlessness, if that is fidgetiness, that is just what is happening in the moment, and that is a part of the practice. So there is a lot of non-judgment that comes into this practice that we need to come back to over and over again with that compassion and kindness during our practice. And if you feel like you can't sit still, that's probably exactly what you need to be doing. So another thing, people think you have to be a Buddhist, you have to be of an Eastern religion. That is not true. I did mention earlier it is a secular practice. You can use it with anything. I myself am a practicing Buddhist, but I also am a Hindu, so it could be really done with anything. So it's not really a religious practice. Particularly mindfulness in the mainstream West is very secular, does not have anything to do with religion, and can, again, be used with anything. People often say to me, oh, yoga, meditation, all of this is for really privileged white people. That's who can experience this, and it's not meant for, the regular person on the street. Well, I have to say I'm not a privileged white person, and these tools have been critical for my own life, and I've seen it be incredibly important for my clients who are part of multiple identities and vulnerable populations. And I really think, and we'll talk about that later, that this is a practice of empowerment. So it is not narcissistic. It's actually quite relational. Another thing is, Reka, I live in the city. I have, kids and a partner and, a noisy apartment or whatever it is that's distracting. I don't have time to go into the forest and meditate. It's not necessary. The point is to be with whatever is there. And so if there is noise, if there is disturbance, how do we engage with that differently? How can we be in the present moment with that in a way that doesn't want it to be different? And that's a key component of things, is our resistance to things. And we'll, again, talk about that a little bit. Another one is I have to empty my mind of thoughts, and I have to have nothing in my head. Well, good luck with that. And if you figure out how to do that, please let me know. My contact information is at the end, because it is impossible. This is what our brain does. Our head is there to think and to take us on all these different paths. And really, this practice is not about emptying the thoughts. Again, it's about having a different relationship to them, creating a little distance, being able to have awareness around what is there, and instead of letting them take us on that journey. It's a way of us understanding that we are not our thoughts. I have to sit still, I can't move, I have to be cross-legged. Again, not true. There's so many different forms of meditation. Some are more rigid than others, but the regular secular practice that we see in the West is very easy. You can do it sitting, you can do it standing, you can do it on the floor, whatever you'd like to do in a way that is alert but comfortable. So this is not about torturing yourself. It really isn't. One doesn't have the time. So we'll talk a little bit about it. I'll do a body scan with you, like I said, towards the end, and we'll be able to see how long it really takes. Again, mindfulness is any moment. So you can come into this by taking 3 minutes in your morning just to sort of be with yourself, take time for self-care, and set your intentions for the day. It is transformative. The breath can be transformative. So let's talk about what meditation is. It's the main tool of mindfulness practice. Now, those two things are not the same. There is mindfulness, and then there is meditation. And meditation is a tool of mindfulness, because mindfulness is any time, anything that brings us into the present moment awareness. So we can be doing any activity as long as we're dropping down into the actual activity itself. So you can mindfully run. You can mindfully talk on the phone. You can be in activity mindfully. Meditation is really about really coming into focus, concentration, as I said in the definition, and finding a single point of reference. I often use sound because my ears are very sensitive, so there's sound awareness. And basically what that means is when I close my eyes, I'm just with the sound that's arising in the room. I'm not having a relationship to it, I'm just listening. I know it sounds a little odd, but it is something that with practice and time you begin to see. But most easily people use the breath. So it really is about noticing the breath coming in and out at any given time. And that is just where it arises in you, if it's your stomach, your chest, where it comes into your nostrils, anywhere that you bring your attention to that place over and over. And when you are distracted, you just bring it back to that breath or that point of reference, whether that's, again, sound or maybe a visual, a chant, etc. And that's why we use an anchor, so that we can continually come back, because inevitably we will wander off in our thoughts. We will feel resistant to whatever's happening around us. We'll get bored sometimes, so we'll often go in other places. And this is, again, a moment-to-moment practice. The kind of meditation that's often given in the West is called a vipassana, or an insight meditation. And what that is really about is just bringing an awareness to what is arising for us when we're sitting or being mindful. And that is very related to mental health. We are bringing our perspective and awareness. Mindfulness is, or meditation in particular, is not a time for analysis or to break down the roots of whatever's arising. So if I'm getting angry and I realize, oh, I just had a conversation with my mother, and then I'm going to go into all the storytelling about my mother, which is very important, but not meant for this time. Really what it is we can ask ourselves the broader questions. What is coming up for me right now? Is it a feeling of unworthiness? Do I feel like I'll never be loved? Or whatever it may be that's coming in a much broader sense. And then how do we shift our perspective so that we can create some distance and be like, okay, that's what I'm feeling. I'm not going to resist it. I'm going to be with it, and then notice as it passes along into another thought. The mind has no pride. It will take you everywhere and in every direction. So you just have to wait a little bit, and you'll see how temporary things really are. So you really have to find what works for you. Again, it's the practice most used in research. It's, there's great things around the benefits of a regular practice, but really any moment that we allow ourselves to be still is a valuable one. So we'll talk about that as well. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about the research, which I think is really important, particularly for people in the mental health world, to be able to see that this is actually an evidence-based practice. There is plenty of research these days. Thousands of studies are being put out by reputable institutions, whatever you may consider that to be, Harvard, Yale, etc., medical schools, you name it, it's being studied. And we're studying particularly meditation practice. In particular, other things that are being studied as well, but meditation in and of itself is the easiest way in which to determine the benefits. So some of the big benefits are really being understood in neuroscience, which I'm sure many of you are hearing about, which is partly why you're here today. We see that a regular practice yields the most benefits, but even over a course of 8 weeks or 10 days, they're finding that the brain is actually the plasticity of the brain is actually quite salient, or that's the big piece that's coming up. So we see things like gray matter density, which increases, which helps with learning, memory, self-awareness, compassion, introspection. We see, the prefrontal cortex thickening, which has to do with attention and emotional regulation. There's actual physical evidence of the changing in the brain that occurs when meditators are meditating. So it's pretty exciting to see that as well, that it's also backed up by science, which also helps in all sorts of ways when we're trying to seek funding or utilize these tools with our clients. We can say it is indeed an evidence-based therapeutic intervention. They've also noticed that it decreases levels of stress. I mean, that is pretty much simple to understand. This practice is very much about relaxing. It's about many things aside from that, but relaxation and de-stressing is a huge factor, particularly in our world where we're managing so much, and particularly in the mental health world. And these research studies have been done in schools, in hospitals, in, the government, in Congress, I mean, in all sorts of different places. So you can see that it's beneficial across the board. Many places have actually used these practices in public schools with young children and have seen it increase, again, that compassion, that understanding that we are interdependent, and that we're actually connected to one another. It increases each child's understanding of that they are part of a greater society, which is never a bad thing. So let's talk about some of these proven outcomes. Greater focus, concentration, efficacy. When you're focused on one thing, when you learn to be able to be in the present with what you're doing, inevitably you'll do it better. So think about the times you're in the office and you're on your email and you're on the phone, you're listening to music and you're doing a bunch of different things, or you're switching back and forth continually. Studies have shown that while we need to multitask, the way we multitask is not very natural to us as human beings. We're not actually very good at it. So whatever we're doing when we're switching back between multiple things is not done to its greatest benefit. So, focus is important. Concentration, efficacy is big in the corporate world, but it's also big in any office environment. So think about a meeting. If everybody was actively listening and present in that time, people wouldn't be repeating things over and over again, and meetings would probably be cut in half. In fact, they've done some studies, particularly in corporations, about bringing mindfulness practice into the boardroom, and meeting times were indeed cut quite shorter, which I think is a benefit to all of us. It obviously decreases stress, anxiety, and depression because, again, we're not vacillating back and forth. We're being with the present moment. We're understanding that what is happening right now means that we're okay and things are fine, and that we're going to be here now. Depression also brings up a lot of physical illness, a lot of difficulty with energy levels. Meditation has been shown to mitigate that as well. Initially, a lot of the studies that were done with these practices were done by John Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts in the medical school with people who were experiencing chronic pain. Nobody knew how to handle it. The clients and the patients were, just depressed and dealing with all sorts of things. And he came in, he studied in Asia for a while, and he came in to utilize some of these practices in a secular way within this group of this population. And these were people no one had success with, and he inevitably did. So it was the beginning of MBSR, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, which many of you might know about, which is an 8-week course that teaches many of these tools. And then for those who want to move on to certification, it's quite a long and lengthy process, but you can be MBSR certified through that. So it's also been shown to help with trauma and PTSD. We know that many of the symptoms of PTSD, and it's been done primarily for veterans, is around hypervigilance, difficulty sleeping, angry outbursts, difficulty with emotional regulation, et cetera, et cetera. And this has been shown when people are able to relate to their body, drop down, find a moment of silence and pause, being able to, again, create that space and regulate their heart rate, regulate their anxiety levels, et cetera, reduce their blood pressure, all of which has been determined as true through meditation. They're able to start working with their symptoms much better. It's not just PTSD, it's trauma in general, and we'll again talk about that a little later. It's been shown for better communication, increased compassion for self and others. It's a little difficult to utilize these practices and still want to hurt another person. If we're bringing compassion and kindness to ourselves, which is primary, as many or all of you know, inevitably it will branch out to those around us and to our experiences. And it's a very cool thing. Recently, they've shown that it's decreased implicit bias, particularly racial bias, meditation that is, and that people, once they were able to be with what their experience was, who the person was right in front of them at that moment, had less of a tendency to come from a conditioned idea of what that person was based on their race. And a lot of these have been done with a loving kindness meditation, which is a practice in which we're asking for, others to receive peace and well-being, and it's sort of said over and over again. It starts out with somebody you love and sort of extends out to the world. It can be a very particular practice. It doesn't have to be a larger practice. If people are a little skeptical about that, I understand. But it has been shown that this actually does that. Obviously, improvements in quality of sleep. If you are regularly taking care of yourself, which is very important for all of us, if you are regularly taking time to be with your just complete and utter tiredness, your exhaustion, and you understand that you need to start taking care of yourself better, and you give yourself this moment of silence to be with yourself. Not to mention, it does regulate heart rate, blood pressure, etc., so that your body can be calmer, it can be in a more regulated state to sleep better. And this has been a great tool in managing addictions, eating disorders, emotional dysregulation, anger, OCD, ADHD, you name it. These tools have been useful. Again, it's about not avoiding what's happening right now, not sort of giving into our fear, but really being there with it. And again, a lot of addictive behavior comes primarily around resistance, avoidance. We use alcohol, sex, money, shopping, substances, etc., to avoid the feelings that are arising with us that come from the past or, again, about the future. When we're in the present moment and we're dealing with the emotions that are arising, understanding that we can tolerate it, and then noticing that it changes and shifts and it is not as permanent as we're fearing it will be, we can actually not utilize those tools. So meditation has actually been used quite a bit in recovery. I've utilized it myself in those practices with clients, and I found it to be very beneficial. And you'd be surprised, people are not as resistant to it as you would think. So those are some outcomes. So let's talk about a little bit about my favorite part of this, which is the relational benefits of mindfulness. When we're sitting in practice, or when we stop and take a moment to breathe and sort of understand where we are at this very moment, we are able to identify what's happening for us, again in that sort of CBT methodology, but not so engaged. We're just able to sort of be with what arises, understand that maybe what is arising for us is not really what's happening in this moment. Again, like that person knocking your shoulder, but also what's happening with a loved one in front of you. They're coming to you, you know, they've had a stressful day, whatever might have happened in these very simple terms, and obviously we can get much bigger and more complex, but your partner comes home, he or she has had or they have had a bad day, and we tend to personalize this. We tend to then react. We tend to say, oh, I feel very dismissed, or I feel like this person's taking it out of me, and then, you know, never mind, I'm just going to go and ignore them and be with myself, or I'm going to start yelling at them, or whatever it might be, or just feel hurt. And I think when we're aware of, what's coming up for me? What am I worried about here? Maybe that person just really had a bad day. Can I inquire if there's anything going on instead of coming up to that person and then reacting? Which brings me to the next point, which is responding versus reacting. How can we then understand that this practice gives us that pause and that moment to be aware of what's happening for us so that we can make the decision rather than just react? We get to make the decision of how we want to take the next moment. That breath, that moment of awareness, that mindfulness, to even be aware of what's arising in the body. When I get angry, my ears get heated and hot. So I'm aware, oh, I'm angry right now. What's that about? It's aware of relating to the body as well. So we relate to others through the relationship to ourselves. And this inevitably will help us with burnout, with self-care, if we're able to sit and take ourselves seriously and put ourselves as a priority and be able to sit with what's arising for us. That in and of itself is an act of self-care. But in that moment, you might just take a moment and say, oh my God, I am exhausted right now. Wow, I've dealt with 60, 80, 100 clients in a week. That my caseload is insane. Or I have 5 really challenging people in my life. And I'm just really exhausted. I'm not sleeping enough. I'm not eating enough. Let me bring some awareness to my day so that I eat lunch. I have breakfast. Small things like this. When we bring a mindfulness practice into our lives, we are literally pausing to be with our body and say, what is happening there? Which is interesting given the fact that so many of us are disassociated from our bodies, and that somatic experiences and somatic techniques in therapy are very useful because they allow us to be very much with what's arising in our thoughts and our feelings, which is not always the case if we're disconnected and dissociated from our bodies, whether it is just who we are or whether we've experienced trauma, assault, etc. These are practices that gently and kindly bring you back into a relationship with your senses and your body. It also allows us to accept others as they are. So who is this person really in front of you? I always talk about this with couples therapy in particular because I think it's really relevant in relationships. We often don't see the person who's in front of us. We often are seeing the person who we want to be in front of us. For whatever reason, all of our childhood wounds, our familial experiences, all of these get us to our choices in partnerships, friendships, relationships with our colleagues. These things arise and trigger over and over again. And sometimes we're not even aware that that's what's happening. When we're able to see the experience, the person, whatever it may be, the situation happening in front of us for what it actually is, as opposed to all the things we're projecting onto it, we're able to then understand that we have a choice and that we may not make the same decision if we were sitting with what is actually happening for us and being able to see who's in front of us. There's a lot to be said on that. And again, we have sort of a limited time to go into it, but I think that's a big one. Mindfulness in communication is about us being able to, again, be aware of what we're saying, be aware of the choice of words we're engaging in, the kind of relationships we're in, and really being thoughtful. What am I saying? Is this going to be useful to what's happening? Am I able to listen really intently and be present for that person in front of me, which is obviously critical for our relationships with our clients, it's one of those things where how much of my presence is really here, or is when this person's talking to me or saying something to me or even yelling at me, am I off in another world? Am I not really hearing what they're saying? Which takes a lot of present moment awareness. Active listening is all about being present. So I want to say something about the system many of us work in. It is a challenging one. Many of us believe that it is broken, and there are many things about it that are incredibly difficult to be with on a day-to-day basis for ourselves, for sure, and also for the people we work for and with. So I think one of the benefits of mindfulness practice is not that we don't want things to be different. It's that we need to understand what it actually is first before we can even hope to have anything different. So that's really about sitting and being able to see something, again, for what it is as opposed to what we wished it would be, which ends up bringing a lot of restriction, constrictiveness into our lives that creates a lot of additional stress. This is what we are dealing with right now. At this moment, in the present moment, there is nothing to be done right at this moment. It doesn't mean that there won't be something to be done going forward, or that we don't plan and have goals and hopes for things to be different. It's about being in the present moment with what it is now and letting go of any expectations or outcomes so that when we are in the present moment, we're not sitting there stewing about something not happening the way we want it to or not being the way we want it to. Our own resistance to the moment actually makes everything 10 times worse. You know, I think people have often said this in recovery and in other places, what we resist persists. That's exactly true. So the more and more you stay into that mindset and don't create some awareness, some perspective, some space, the more it'll continue to be that way. Again, adding more additional stress to your life and unfortunately leading to burnout as well. Yeah, so it is a relational practice primarily because when we take these moments to be with ourselves, to sit with ourselves, we inevitably will be kinder, more compassionate, at least more present, at least, for those around us and the things that are happening. And primarily, this is about taking a pause in your day. I like to tell people in the office space that I know it's a crazy day, I know it's hectic. I don't care if you have to find a closet, a corner, somewhere, but when you're feeling like you're overwhelmed, you're stressed out, that one moment of being able to go someplace else. And again, I know this is not always easy, but even sitting at your desk and just doing some deep breathing, which we'll begin our body scan with, can really help you find some presence again and the courage and the ability to continue on with your day. These are just check-ins over and over throughout their day. There's some great applications around this, and so, you know, we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. So, benefits for clients and for the Therapeutic Alliance. I'd like to say because these practices are really grounded in a kindness and compassion, in non-judgment, again, I keep mentioning these three things because they're vital both for our own practice, but also how we are with those around us, and particularly in relationship to those we're in therapy with or helping in any kind of capacity, whether that's helping them find housing, etc. If we come in with a foundation of kindness, compassion, and non-judgment, it is the first time for many of our clients that they even get to experience that, particularly for people who are within an agency or something where they feel like they're being shifted around continuously. But really in any moment, this is often a population of people who are completely stressed out all the time. People are dismissive of them, etc. Sometimes it's just a miraculous thing to experience a moment of kindness. So coming into that place where you can access that kindness, that compassion for the people in front of you, despite all the stress, is really monumental. I've experienced this so many times when people have dual diagnosis, chronic disorders, multiple systems, dealing with hospitals, taking 15 different medications, just my ability to say, gosh, that must be really difficult for you. And I know we've talked about this a lot, but there is in our work, and it seems really simple, and it's not the only thing we need to be doing, but it really is critical in how that person then can engage with us and maybe trust us. And one of the things that happens when we offer our full presence and attention is that people feel it. in that previous slide, it was a quote that says that people will blossom in our presence when we bring it fully to them. And that's true. I think anybody can relate to that point where we can see when somebody's not really with us. We can see when somebody's distracted, when they're not engaged with us, and they're not really listening. And that doesn't really help to build an alliance, to build trust, to build, like, you know, just the basic understandings of caring. So when you're able to be fully with somebody, and again, that looks like listening, just listening, our whole body, our whole sense of being is with that client. And again, I know that's not always possible, but the more and more we do these practices, the more we understand when we're not there, so that we can return again, over and over again, to that moment. And that shift is really critical. It's good management for both our triggers and for theirs. We're often working with very difficult, challenging people, or maybe not even, they just remind us of somebody in our life and something arises for us. And instead of bringing that into the room, bringing that into the relationship, into the experience, into the housing, into whatever it is that you're dealing with in your day, it's, again, about taking that pause to realize I am being triggered right now because I am taking that moment to be aware of my body. I am in relationship to my body. I'm aware of the constriction in my back, my stomach tightening, my throat closing, whatever it is that happens for you somatically to indicate that there is something coming up for you right now. And so we don't react, we can respond or take a moment to recollect, collect ourselves and then engage again. Temporal differences. I talk about this because sometimes people are just in different places in life. They're not moving as fast. I am notorious for being impatient. This is why these practices are so important to me. I want everybody to be where I am, think like I do, or I used to. I'm obviously much better at it now, but these things still come up despite however many years of practice, and they will continue to come up because that's just life. But it's one of those things where we can accept where our clients are. Where are they right now in their life, instead of wanting them to be different or wanting them to be at step 5 of their treatment plan. They're at step 2. This is just their process and their life, and we can't impose ourselves because of what we want into that situation. We're accepting the person in front of us, understanding that their life is their own, and that inevitably we're interdependent, but that we are also responsible for ourselves, and that other people are responsible for themselves as much as they can be. So it kind of takes away some of the grand responsibility that many of us feel for people who are coming into our spaces. We want their lives to be radically different. It comes from a good place. It's just not always possible. And when we can be with what is right now, that's all there is. We're not thinking too much about where we wish they would be or where we're hoping they will be, even though we might have the best of intentions. And so we don't always, when our treatment plans are done or when we're writing them out, obviously we have all these goals in mind going forward of what we'd like to see happen. Sometimes those don't happen. Often they don't. And so we have to learn how to be with what's happening as it arises in order to let go of some of these constricted thinking around what's supposed to happen. And again, that's really this idea of expanding what it is to be who we are at any given time, which also obviously helps manage our burnout, which I talked about earlier as well. It's about understanding also and helping our clients to see that in this very moment where we are here with each other, without war, violence happening right around us, unless we're in we're walking around, that's part of our job and it is violent, but primarily we're okay when we're engaging with somebody. Now, if they are stressed out or challenged or whatever is happening in that moment, I understand these are difficult practices to say, I'm okay in this moment. Obviously, it's not for every moment. But when we're sitting in a space, when we're in our offices, when we're with our loved ones, when we are even with clients, there are moments when we can come into the present moment and realize right now nothing is happening to me. And I think many clients walk around with that expectation that something's going to happen to them at any moment. And it's completely justified because of things that have happened to them in the past. Or a larger system at work that makes their lives very difficult to feel safe and to feel okay. So to be able to give them that awareness in that moment that right now you're okay, it's kind of a big deal. And I think it's kind of critical. Again, I understand the skepticism. I'm not saying this is good for everything, but I think it's good for many moments. Again, going back to integrating the mind and the body, a lot of dissociation happens, particularly with PTSD and trauma, but in many of our lives, we're walking floating heads down the street. We're in our thoughts. We're thinking about all the lists we have to do, all the things we have to do, you know, the 5 different clients we have to manage in 1 hour, whatever it may be. And so if we're able to drop down into our senses for just a moment when we're there, when we're walking in different spaces, if we're walking across, you know, the street, how do we engage with that walk so that we don't have to be in our heads all the time, so that we can actually be and witness what is happening around us. I talked about the subway a little before. We can get really aggravated. Sometimes if we can just take a moment to take a breath, we realize that everybody around us is a person too. They might be difficult people, but they are people. And everybody has their challenges as well. Again, I know this sounds like I'm making it really simple. I really don't believe it is, but the more we can sort of tune into that, the better. And so when we're making decisions, that's a big piece. What decision do we want to make? Again, I talked about relationship choices, but do we want to make a decision based on our conditioning or what is actually happening right now for us? There's a level of empowerment that happens. This Howard Thurman quote is one of my favorites, and I talk about it a lot. And I'll just read it to you quickly. We don't have a ton of time left, but there is something in every one of you that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. It is the only true guide you will ever have, and if you cannot hear it, you will spend your days on the ends of strings that somebody else pulls. I think that is absolutely related to mindfulness practice. If we are aware of what is occurring for us at any given moment, if we understand what's happening to us through our conditioning versus what's actually happening, what we want to do versus what others have wanted us to do, and to understand that we actually may have a choice in all of this, even if it's just through our ability to respond versus react, then we're less thrown in the wind. We're less able to be on the sea that's just taking us wherever it wants to go. This is a practice of empowerment. We have present moment awareness. We understand that when we sit with unpleasant thoughts and feelings that are arising and tolerate that we understand our own resiliency, and that in fact, I am stronger than I think I am, which is really vital for the people we work with who feel often disempowered, vulnerable, etc. The fact that they can sit and tolerate, which many of them do and they don't even realize it on a day-to-day basis, they obviously are. They're incredibly resilient, but bringing their own awareness to it is really vital. The non-judgment and compassion piece is an empowering piece. When we feel judged, when we feel hurt, we are feeling vulnerable and weak, and definitely vulnerable to other people's sway and opinion. We understand that whatever we're experiencing right now is temporary. When we're meditating and we're sitting with our thoughts, we again see that they change so consistently, and that it is actually, there is a transience to everything. There is a temporariness of everything. And the sitting with our thoughts and witnessing that from a distance, we can see that that's actually true beyond just our thinking process. It is true with most things in life. The only constant is change, and that is absolutely true. We see that we're interconnected with others, and so our want to, react again or be, distressed or be hurtful in any way diminishes. Again, the studies prove it. And that's obviously an act of self-empowerment when you're protecting yourself from behaviors that will get you in trouble or cause problems for you. This is only a good thing. That doesn't mean that you engage in that all the time. This is about understanding and being aware of what's happening for anyone in your room at the time and your clients, etc. It's not always useful to sort of be nonviolent or to be sitting backwards, but obviously that is what we want them to understand is the best, and for ourselves too. And I like this idea that it expands our understanding of who we are, of what is possible for us, that we are not stuck in this any one way of being. That in fact, again, because of the temporary nature of things, that the self has the possibility to change, which can be very frightening for many people. Who am I? What is this process if I can constantly be changing? There is a self, but there is also an understanding that that self can be something else. The power of change is possible. And again, when we notice that we're more in touch with who we are, we're seeing the relational benefits, we're seeing all these things that are arising for us, we can then be in a different capacity with them. And so I talk about these practices are often being utilized in social justice movements. There are some amazing teachers who are doing mindfulness practices with the Black Lives Matter movement and with many other different movements as well. It's being used in all sorts of places. So, acronyms. I love acronyms, probably because I'm in this world of mental health and we love acronyms. I love them because they're simple and easy tools to share both for ourselves and for our clients. So STOP is literally when something is arising for you in your body or you're about to just yell at somebody or react, that we stop. Take a breath, observe, proceed. Amazing. I know it sounds super simple, but for any of you who have just taken a moment and say, okay, I'm going to take a breath here and then move on, you can see that it actually does make a huge difference. I like drops because it speaks to that avoidance piece, that resistance piece, which is don't resist or push, and soften. Our body is often walking around like this. I do this. I walk around the streets like, you know, being born and raised in New York, I am also hypervigilant, and I realize how tight my body is. When we do the body scan, you'll be able to see these places in your body that are just holding all this tension because we're resisting things. We're feeling tension, we're feeling stressed, which is often about wanting something to be different than it is. So if we soften, we take a breath, we relax into our bodies, it changes our whole experience. And RAIN, which is the last one, is really about investigating what is arising. It's kind of a little more advanced practice and takes some time to get, but we're recognizing what is arising for us in our practice, whatever feelings or emotions, we're being with it. Okay, I'm angry right now. That's all right, I'm angry. And then we look, what is the anger about? Oh, I'm feeling unworthy, I'm feeling unhappy. Is there a way to just recognize that and then let it go and be with it? So those are sort of the spaces in which we can use these acronyms and we can share them with our clients. At any given moment when you're about to be triggered or you're about to react, how can we utilize these acronyms in our head? Simple, easy words to be able to bring up quickly over and over again to bring our awareness into the present moment. So I just talked a lot, and I want to be able to have enough time for this body scan that I'd like you to experience. So I'm going to move on, and then hopefully we'll have at least some time for Q&A. Okay, so I'm going to take a drink of water. So basically this body scan is very much about the ability to just tap into your senses and in your body and literally do a scan of your body and different parts of it. So I'm not sure where many of you are right now, since there's so many of you. If you are sitting in a chair, what I suggest you do is to move up a little bit in the chair so that your back is upright but comfortable, your feet are on the ground, your hands are either face up, down, or folded. If you're sitting on the floor, you can do this. If you don't feel comfortable doing any of that, that's fine. If you just want to sit back, you're welcome to do that as well. And for those of you who feel comfortable to do so, I'm going to ask that you close your eyes. And if you don't, I would just choose a point of reference somewhere in the room that is not going to bring too much stimulus. If you can turn off the lights, close a door, please do so. I often do that myself. Okay, and again, if you feel any distraction, we'll have a little bit of silence, very, very little. Don't worry, this is a part of the process. Just come back to my voice over and over again. Okay, so let's begin. Let's start with a deep breath in through the nose. Again, that's very deep, filling the lungs so you can almost hear the breath coming into your nose. So a experience, and then you're going to hold it just for a moment before releasing it through your mouth. Make sure that the release is as slow, if not slower, than the inhale. So again, let's take a breath in through the nostrils. Again, filling the belly, rounding it out, filling the lungs, holding it for just a moment, and then releasing it through the mouth. Take one final breath in, again, taking your day in, your stressors, in, holding it for even an additional moment if you can. And as you release through your mouth, just relax your shoulders. Try to soften into your body, almost as if you are water to air to gas. So let's begin at the crown of our heads. We can, if you like, if it helps, imagine a light of any color, of any texture. And I just want you to use that to guide you down your body. So let's begin at the crown, move to the forehead. Again, softening and relaxing each muscle, any tension, bringing awareness to sensations, vibrations, whatever is happening, but primarily just to loosen and relax. The sides of your eyes, all those little muscles, down into your cheeks, your jawline. And you can release that jaw by putting the tongue against the roof of your mouth so that there's a little space between your teeth. Again, using the breath over and over again to help you engage with your body as you move down into your chest, to your heart space, through your back, your lower back. Again, releasing, relaxing as you go, down into the part of your body that meets whatever you're sitting on, bringing awareness to where that happens for you. Now moving down into your thighs, your knees, your calf muscles. Again, just bringing any awareness to where you may hold tension or constriction. As you move into your feet, bringing your attention and awareness to the bottom of your feet, each toe being illuminated by this guiding light. And again, feeling your feet in your shoes and learning to relax, bringing some relaxation. Moving up into our upper arms, down into the forearms, softening our hands, our fingers, bringing our attention and awareness to the palms of our hands. And breathing and relaxing at any given moment when we are resisting or finding ourselves tense or constricted. How can we let go? How can we use the breath to release? And finally, let's bring our awareness to our entire body, illuminating our entire body, and just seeing if there's any other place that's calling to our attention, looking for some relaxation and release, and let's see if we can give it. Again, always engaging in kindness and compassion as we do these practices. And in the interest of time, let's just take one final breath in through the nose and releasing out of our mouths, bringing a sense of well-being and self-care into our day. And opening our eyes when we feel ready, coming back into the room. So that was a very short body scan. I apologize. I wanted to do a bit longer one, but so much to cover in an hour. And unfortunately, again, we only have about 5 or 6 or 7 minutes for questions, so we'll open it up for at least some of them now. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope I can answer some of your questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Rekha. That was such a wonderful presentation. I think that you gave some great information about what mindfulness is, what it isn't, and how people can use it not only in their personal lives, but also in their relationships with their clients and the people that they serve and provide services for. So thank you so much. We did get a few questions. One of the questions is, at what age is mindfulness best for children?
There are children who are engaging in these practices as young as 5 years old. They brought them into nursery schools, kindergarten. I've seen parents bring children into meditation spaces as babies. I think it's one of those things, because of the plasticity of the brain, it is something that is great to engage in as soon as possible, but always really great in a structured environment like a center or a school. So really at any age, but formally most likely when they're in school, the school age practice.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very helpful. Another question is, at what point in our process of accepting a client where they are, do we also recognize that they are not at a stage of change and are not making any progress? Do you have any suggestions around this?
So I think the big component of that is being able to let go of that actual change. I know that's a big deal because that's sort of what we're hired to do for our clients, but again, it's that temporal difference. They aren't probably where we would like them to be, but they are where they are. So the first place to start is where you are with the process and the attachment to the actual need for it to be different, for something else to be in this present moment. It's not that we don't encourage there to be change, that we don't want our clients to have a better, more advantageous life, but we let go of the need to control the situation at any given point because this is what it is. This is what's happening for them right now. And there are probably some very good reasons why they're so resistant to the change. So if we can actually accept where they are right at the moment that we're in with them, it actually expands and opens up some space to find out where there might be some resistance and to utilize these practices to help them identify them as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you, great advice. And then we have two more questions. One is, how would you recommend starting a group mindfulness practice at the workplace with interested colleagues?
Maybe we should ask you. You all started one. I mean,
I could comment on that. I mean, you know, I do want to say that Reka did, as Ida had mentioned earlier, she joined us and offered a presentation at our workplace, and we decided it would be really beneficial for us to all get together. So what we did was we started one morning, every Thursday morning from 9:30 to 10, and sometimes it's only 15 minutes, sometimes it's a full half an hour, but we all just gather together and take turns bringing some kind of topic, or we go to YouTube and find some kind of mindfulness meditation, but gathering together with your colleagues, I think, it's a very helpful practice, and also starting your day. So if some of you get there earlier, you can do that, but 9:30 to 10 seem to work best for us, as some of us stay later at work. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but it's been really helpful for us at our workplace.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely say that's the way to go about it. Try to find a regular time every week that's consistent. That's, again, what you're going to find the most benefit of your practice. It also helps you with accountability. Looking for resources around guided meditations. Not everybody's voice is good for the ears. Not everybody likes the sound of everybody's voice. So finding that one voice that speaks to you as a group, either, again, through YouTube, or there are tons of resources online, podcasts, et cetera, that offer guided meditations. I have a resource page for you, and I'll be posting some podcasts myself eventually. Starter resources are here. They're in the document, so you're welcome to look for online resources to start that and guide your practice. There are also tons of centers within New York where you can go. Group practice is incredibly nourishing for your individual practice. It feels very different. It feels very supported. I very much encourage you to start a group at work. Again, set your intention for the day, like Kara said, and really come into the self so that you can be with your day in a really positive and present way. Oh. I think we lost.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
Our last question is around certification. We have a few people that are interested in going further with this work and looking into certification. Do you have any recommendation around that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say very importantly that there are lots of certification processes out there right now, and many of them are incredibly expensive, but I will say that MBCT is a good way, particularly around our work, to be able to find the contact between the two. The other part is there are places, like I said, the University of Massachusetts Medical Center called Pathways does the MBSR certification. Again, that takes many, many years, which I actually think is very good. Nobody should sort of be coming into these practices without some understanding for what they are for their own lives, but really good training It takes a good teacher to be able to do these things, and you should have a long-standing practice for yourself. Some of the smaller tools you can obviously engage in, breathing practices, etc., but there aren't a lot of one-day certifications that I would participate in. UCLA MARC has a certification that's 1 year. A lot of other programs are also a year. You have to find what works for you, both financially and time-wise. But again, be aware that when you go into sort of a continuing ed course and they give you your certification, that's not enough. It's important to be very knowledgeable and have a deep practice yourself, whether it's meditation or just a mindfulness practice yourself. So there are certifications out there. Just be wary of ones that are not quite as reputable and not as extensive, because I just don't think they'll give you the tools that you need to be able to utilize this in a way that's really beneficial to everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating today. There will be a short feedback form when we log off. Please fill that out if you have just a few seconds. And we have some upcoming events on www.ctacny.com. We have a webinar September 11th. It's a MCTAC webinar on readiness assessments for preparation for managed care readiness. And then we have person-centered care webinars happening at the end of August in a week, and then another one in September. So please go to our website and join us for our upcoming offerings. And I just want to give Reka another big thank you so much for participating and presenting with us today. And I think we've all gotten a lot out of your presentation.
Thank you, and may you all be very well.
Okay, have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.